Luna here, and I apologize if my voice sounds a little bit off because I am recovering from a cold. But moving along, today we're doing a run suggested by Necro Eric YouTube. Can you beat Oblivion with only Daedric Artifacts? Let's go over the rules. We can't use our fists, starting spells, powers, potions, or scrolls. We can't use any weapons, armor, or spells that aren't Daedric Artifacts. We're wearing a dress because I don't want to risk YouTube freaking out when I show the inventory menu. It has no armor and we aren't allowed to enchant it, so it provides no benefits. We're allowed to use Wayshrines to restore attributes and cure diseases, but we must wait for the shrine's buff to wear off before we proceed with the run. In the quest rewards only run, our inability to restore attributes and cure diseases forced us to save scum a lot to avoid enemies that had damage attribute enchantments and such. It didn't produce a fun kind of difficulty for me, or I suspect for you. We must successfully complete all the base game Daedric Quests before entering Paradise. We need offerings to start certain Daedric Quests, so looting and trading are allowed. We can use gold for repairs, recharging enchantments, training, etc. No glitches or gameplay mods. Official DLC is allowed. I know there are tons of items that have Daedric origins that arguably should count for this run, especially in the DLCs, but to keep things simple, we're sticking to artifacts Martin can use in the ritual to enter Paradise. We have to get to level 20 to complete all the Daedric quests, and we'll have to do it with no spells and very little armor. That being said, we'll have strong melee weapons, so we're going with an orc. I considered picking Breton for more magic resistance, but the strength and endurance from being an orc will be helpful. We pick the warrior birth sign for more strength and endurance, and pick blade, heavy armor, light armor, acrobatics, sneak, speechcraft, and mercantile for our major skills. I considered picking blunt, but keeping it as a minor skill will be helpful for grinding strength. I picked both armor skills, so we'll get more out of what little armor we'll have, and the last 4 skills are for easy level grinding and gold. And this is a character that just ran through the tutorial. It's actually the same starting file as the last challenge. So the only things that have increased are just non-combat skills, so we're good. I haven't done anything that would break the challenge rules. We joined the Mages Guild so we can raid their guild halls and buy some of the offerings we'll need. All of their alchemists have a grand soul gem regardless of our level, which we'll need to turn into a black soul gem for Vermina. We also found a lion pelt and a bear pelt in chests in the guild halls, which we'll need for Molag Bal and Hircine. We also grabbed cheap wine for Namira, and lettuce, a lesser soul gem, and yarn for Sheogorath. We found almost all the remaining offerings at the main ingredient in the Imperial City Market District. Nightshade for Mephala, Glow Dust for Azura, Cyrodiilic Brandy for Sanguine, Bone Meal for Meridia, and a Daedra Heart for Boethia. We still need Troll Fat for Malakath. There's some in a display case at the Skingrad Mages Guild Hall, but it's locked and we can't get Nocturnal's skeleton key to unlock it until we're level 10. We train our armorer skill at a fighting chance. It's the only way we can increase endurance until we have either a shield or weapon to block with, because we can't block with our fists or put on a 10 suit to grind heavy armor. We could repair enemies' damaged gear, but unless you use a disintegrate armor or weapon spell, they don't usually take that much damage before we take them out. So it's really slow to grind armor that way. We level up and take 3 endurance, 2 speed, and 5 intelligence. We got the intelligence from brewing potions to sell, and we increased it to make sure we'll have enough magicka to cast the spells needed for certain Daedric quests. We're now a high enough level for Azura and Sheogorath's quests, but we can't complete them yet. Azura wants us to slay vampires, and during Sheogorath's quest we have to steal some stinky cheese. We can't deal damage yet, and we can't pick locks until we have the skeleton key, so it's back to leveling. We grind acrobatics, so level 3 grants us 4 speed, 3 endurance, and 1 strength. We keep leveling that way until we hit level 8, getting 4 or 5 speed, 3 endurance, and 1 strength for most of them. Namira's, Vermina's, and Sanguine's quests are now open. However, I forgot that we need to cast Soul Trap at the Necromancer altars to turn our Grand Soul Gem into a Black Soul Gem. Soul Trap spells are against the rules, and none of the Daedric Artifact staves cast Soul Trap. Enchanted weapons don't work on the altars, so even if we had Umbra, we couldn't create Black Soul Gems. There's also another issue with using Umbra for anything, but we'll get to that later. The Black Soul Gems in Falcar's room during the Shaden Hall recommendation won't work either. Internally, they're Grand Soul Gems, not Black Soul Gems. There are other ways to acquire Black Soul Gems, but for now, we don't have an offering for Vermina. We do have offerings for Namira and Sanguine, though. First up is Namira. We drink our one allowed potion of the run, a bottle of cheap wine, to lower our personality. We could have avoided powers and consumables by catching a personality-lowering disease like Greenspore, but I'm still having nightmares about Scalons from the All Diseases run, so forgive me for taking a shortcut. Now that we're unpleasant enough, Namira gives us a spell to use on the priests of Arche that are troubling her followers. Since the spell is from Namira, I'm okay with using it, so we can complete her quest as intended by casting Namira's Shroud on the priests. Namira rewards us with her ring, which grants 12% damage reflection and 10% spell reflection. With it, we can technically damage enemies by letting them hit us, but it won't be as effective as it was in the reflected damage only run, because we can't get any more damage reflection, and we can only get up to 40% spell reflection once we have Periite's Spellbreaker. We also have no way of healing during combat, which is a major issue if we have to take damage to deal damage. Next up is Sanguine's quest, which as far as I know requires us to use the spell from Sanguine, Stark Reality, to complete successfully. Like Namira's Shroud, I'm okay with using Stark Reality because we received it from a Daedric prince.
The mistress is an especially somber soul, and tomorrow she will hold another excruciating dinner party. I want you to liven it up. Use this spell on the Countess and her guests. I think it will make the party much more interesting. You should probably try to be inconspicuous, or they might kill you. Oh, and the party is by invitation only. You'll have to find a way in. Have fun.
We got into the party by throwing a pile of gold at the guard, but it took a few tries to get Stark Reality to hit all the guests. Everyone was present. The Countess often fails to show up to her own party if she's visiting Coral, but she was there. However, there were also 3 guards that wandered in on their way to the servants' quarters, and all of them stopped to have delightfully long, meandering Oblivion conversations with the Countess and her guests. I don't know if Bethesda programmed Stark Reality to only affect a certain number of targets or what, but the guards seemed to really throw it off. Even if I aimed at a guest near the center of the table, it would only hit a few of the guests and some of the guards. 2 guards left after 1 conversation, but the 3rd one wouldn't shut up. He kept talking to the Countess and her guests until we pushed him to the door to the servants' quarters, and even then he didn't leave until the conversation he was having wrapped up. Once he was gone, Stark Reality went off without a hitch, meaning everyone, including us, had their possessions removed, and the guards were not happy with us. Our gold had disappeared, so we couldn't pay our bounty, so we ran like our tail was on fire until the music said we were safe. From there, we fast-traveled back to Sanguine's Shrine and reclaimed our stuff plus the Sanguine Rose, a staff that summons a random Daedra. According to the wiki, it prefers to attack whoever we summon it next to, but may turn on us if it takes out its target, we get too close, or the game just feels like it. It can only be used 10 times before it runs out of charge, and recharging it is expensive, at least for now, so we can't spam it. We paid our bounty afterwards. During our next grinding session, a conjurer attacked us. Apparently he's part of the Spell Tomes DLC, and like the Dark Brotherhood assassin in Morrowind's Tribunal expansion, he'll show up randomly and attack. He's carrying a spell tome. That's it. That's the point of his existence. We ran away and entered the Imperial City, but we were stuck in combat with the Conjurer who had disappeared. The guards couldn't find him either, and this was the result. Thankfully, the glitched combat ended when we loaded our last save, and we only lost a bit of grinding. Once we're level 10, a lot of Daedric quests open up. Malakaths, Meridias, Periites, and Nocturnals. Nocturnal will give us the skeleton key, an unbreakable lockpick that will allow us to finally pick locks. Unless you're doing a challenge where you only allow lockpicking with the skeleton key, it isn't amazing. I suspect it was better in earlier games where lockpicking was based entirely on your character's skill, but in Oblivion, not so much. So I'm not sure why the quest was restricted to level 10 or above. The trolls in Tidewater Cave might be a threat at lower levels, but it's easy to run past them to get the Eye of Nocturnal, even if you aren't sure where the eye is and get lost. Not that I would know. Now that we can pick locks, we can do Malakath's quest. Currently, our only ways of fighting back are our minuscule damage reflection and the Sanguine Rose, which has 10 charges, can only summon one thing at a time, and each summon only lasts 20 seconds. Unless we're lucky enough to summon Zivali and Daedroths, I don't think it'll get through the heavily armored guards, but we don't have to fight them. Like Tidewater Cave, we can run past everything and free the ogres with the skeleton key. Apparently that's enough for Malakath to take over the estate, so he gives us Volendrung as a reward. That's worth celebrating, even if it isn't a weapon I care for. In my opinion, maces and hammers don't do enough damage to be worth their slower speed and higher stamina cost. Maybe that would change if we could use magic or potions to restore our stamina, but in this run we can only let it regenerate on its own or wait outside of combat. While having low stamina isn't as bad in Oblivion as it is in Morrowind, it does have detrimental effects, like reducing our melee damage and making us easier to stagger. Volendrung is a fairly heavy warhammer, so it consumes a ton of stamina per swing, and it's slow, so it's easy for enemies to stagger lock us. We can block or dodge to create openings to counterattack, but we have to be careful, especially when fighting groups. Despite our high health, we can't take much punishment because we have no armor. We have Namira's Ring, which reflects 12% of incoming damage, but we still take the remaining damage. Our magical defenses are a bit better thanks to our 25% magic resistance, and we also have 10% spell reflection, but that still isn't great. Complaining aside, this is what we have, so we'd best get on with it. We'll get Azura's Star next. Most of the vampires went down easily, but the last orc vampire was putting up a fight. Then it all descended into chaos when the guards from Lord Drad's mine stormed in, slayed the vampire, and proceeded to kick our teeth in. This happened repeatedly, and we'd overwritten our autosave by waiting to heal before we fought the last vampire, so we couldn't pit them against the weaker vampires. Not that I think they would have helped much, considering they were much weaker than the mine guards. After a few tries, we got them to fight the last vampire and led them outside. Azura's quest takes place in the middle of the Gerald Mountains, so there wasn't anyone around to help, but we at least had more room to maneuver. Once an enemy is locked in on us, it's difficult to get them to change targets. If we used the Sanguine Rose to summon a Daedra, the Mine Guards still focused on us. The one our summon targeted might attack the summon instead, but only if they were hit several times. So our summons spent most of their brief existence running after the Mine Guards as they chased us, unless we circled back, which was hard to do without getting hit. We can't heal in combat, so we really couldn't afford to take much chip damage. I feel like enemies are more likely to target summons, followers, guards, or even each other in Skyrim. If we were lucky enough to summon a Clanfear, Storm Atronach, or Zivali, which can summon its own Clanfear, then we didn't have to worry about hurting the Mine Guards as much because Storm Atronachs had strong ranged magic, and Clanfears were fast enough to run the guards down. But the Daedroth needed our help to do anything. The Scamp was useless, as you might expect, and if we summoned one of those, we loaded back to the start of the fight. There were a couple wolves nearby that occasionally attacked the Mine Guards, but they'd usually turn on us even if we left them alone. You could argue that the Mind Guards focusing on us, the summoner, was actually smart, but why were the wolves on their side? It took several tries to get summons that softened the Mind Guards up enough for us to finish them off, and we used all the Sanguine Rose charges. We'd used up a few charges before this fight testing the Rose out, and I was regretting it the whole time. We should keep it charged from now on. With that ordeal over, we return to Azura's shrine and claim her star. It'll be useful for keeping our other artifacts charged once we get Umbra to trap souls. I figured this would be a good time to do Sheogorath's quest since it doesn't require combat and frankly I needed a break. We can open the display case in the inn with the skeleton key and steal the stinky cheese to attract the rats. From there, it's a simple matter of putting the rat poison the town Shraman drops into the livestock feeding trough. Is it weird that I felt worse about these sheep than I did about the priests of RK? The priests could have left the Forgotten alone, so I feel like they had options. These poor sheepies didn't. Not to mention that we're terrorizing this town. Some of the Daedric quests can be completed as a good character, but not all of them. Which is a good thing, in my opinion. Some Daedra might be helpful sometimes, but they're unpredictable and some are downright evil. Looking at you, Moleg Ball. Regardless, the deed is done and we receive the Wabbajack. It's time to get Spellbreaker, again. I'll be glad to have it because it's one of the only armor pieces that we'll get during this run. We fight Clanfear Runts, Scamps, and Flame Atronachs to rescue the souls of Periite's followers. Individually, none of the enemies are too bad, but 2 can be tricky, 3 are usually difficult, and if we have to fight more than 3 at once, then we messed up. We can take out the Clanfear Runts and Scamps quickly, although they can hurt us if they spam their forward lunging attacks. The Flame Atronachs are pretty tanky and hurt enough to be concerning, especially if they have allies. As for Volendrunk's paralysis effect that I didn't bother to mention until now, its charge ran out before we were done with the first 2 enemies. That's why I didn't mention it, and we're not going to recharge it until we have another weapon, so we can save Volendrunk for special occasions. A few of the fights were close, and we had to wait to heal a lot, but we found all the souls and claimed Spellbreaker. Unfortunately, we won't get its armor as long as we're using 2-handed weapons like Volendrunk or the Staves, but we can equip it for its spell reflection, bringing our total spell reflection to 40%. There's only one more Daedric quest we can do without leveling, Meridia's, at least until we find a Black Soul Gem for Vermina. The Necromancer's Meridia wants us to clear out are in the Howling Cave near Skingrad. The enemies in the first part of the cave aren't too bad, mostly rats and mud crabs with a skeleton guardian and headless zombie thrown in. We don't have to take them out for the quest, but we needed this part of the cave to be safe to wait in. You'll see why in a moment. When we entered the lair, we were attacked by 2 necromancers and their minions. On top of that, the necromancers could each summon a temporary minion, usually a headless zombie or skeleton guardian. The only way to avoid being surrounded was to lead them back into the entrance tunnel. If we ran around the cave, we'd risk alerting more enemies. Once we were at about half health, we went back to the first part of the cave. Sometimes a few enemies followed us, but only if they were next to the door, and sometimes not even then. If the permanent minions followed us, we could easily remove them. A necromancer following us was less than ideal. We'll come back to that. Once we took out whatever followed us, we could wait to heal. I don't like using such cheesy strategies, but I couldn't see an alternative at the time. We hadn't recharged the Rose, but even if we had, I'm not sure it would have been effective. The minions made it difficult for us to get to the necromancers, so they'd probably block our summons too. And if they couldn't get to the necromancers, they might have just turned to target us. As for the Wabbajack, I forgot we had it. Feel free to facepalm, because I am as I'm writing this script, and it'll probably be even worse when I'm editing the footage. Turning the Necromancer's minions into creatures that would hopefully turn on their allies would have probably been useful. But no, we forced our way through with Namira's Ring, Spellbreaker, and Volendrung. None of the minions were difficult on their own, but they were tanky, and the headless zombie hit like a truck if we ignored them to focus on the Necromancer. Our first goal was to remove the permanent minions, so we only had to deal with the Necromancers and their temporary summons. Even after we managed that, taking out the Necromancers was difficult. It took several hits to put them down despite their lack of armor, and they had a lot of healing. Their glass weapons could also do a fair bit of damage thanks to our lack of armor, and they allowed the Necromancers to block. Thanks to our slow swings, they had plenty of time to block, which staggered us and gave them time to run away, or heal, or summon a new minion. The only way to get consistent hits in was to block one of their hits, get a lucky stagger, or catch them while they were casting a spell, even if it meant taking a lightning or frostbolt to the face. We had to get more than one of those to happen in a row to take them out before they healed, or we had to get a lucky spell reflection. It took several tries, a few deaths, and a lot of leaving, waiting to heal, and re-entering, but we eventually cleared them out. Honestly, if we'd had much more trouble, I probably would have recharged Volendrung and tried paralyzing the Necromancers. That probably would have made things easier. I just didn't feel like going and recharging the thing and coming back. The funny thing is that Meridio's reward, the Khajiit ring, isn't that useful. The 35% chameleon can be downright game-breaking if it's stacked with other chameleon effects, but it also makes us almost completely transparent, and that throws me for a loop in combat. On PC, there's an I&I tweak to change that, but we can't do that on the 360 version, even if I allowed it. So even though the 10 speed would be nice, I'm only going to use it for traveling or performing sneak attacks. Currently, sneak attacks are useless to us because spells and two-handed weapons like warhammers don't get any sneak attack bonus, regardless of our sneak skill. I think making heavier weapons, especially two-handed ones, harder to sneak with would have made more sense if they wanted to penalize sneaking with certain weapons and incentivize using daggers. Clobbering someone with a warhammer while undetected should hurt just as much as a mace, in my opinion, but I could see it being harder to do. Casting spells already has a sneak penalty because they glow, so if we're still undetected after that, I think we deserve bonus damage. But these are the mechanics we have, so moving on. Now that we've done all the Daedric quests that we have the levels and offerings for, we have two goals: level up and find a black soul gem. I was hoping we'd get a black soul gem from the Necromancers we took out from Meridia, but no such luck. Some Mages Guild quests have encounters with Necromancer adepts that may have black soul gems, and the Necromancer's Moon quest would allow us to take a black soul gem created by a worm anchorite at one of their altars. However, all those quests happen after we get the recommendations and do other busy work on top of that. There are several dungeons with Necromancer adepts that we can access without going into the Mages Guild. We're most interested in Moss Rock Cavern, Garlus Agea, Blood Run Cave, and Ellen Glen. I can pretty much guarantee I didn't pronounce those right. Yay, elven names! The other locations are either locked behind quests, or have tons of regular Necromancers and minions between us and the Necromancer Adept, or they only have regular Necromancers that never have black soul gems. The good news is that all these locations respawn after a few in-game days, so if we cycle between them, there shouldn't be much downtime where we're stuck waiting. The fastest method would probably be to save outside Moss Rock Cavern, clear out the two Necromancer adepts, and then load our save outside the cavern if they didn't have black soul gems so we could immediately respawn them and try again. Even waiting outside Moss Rock Cavern to respawn it normally would likely be faster than cycling through the different dungeons, because Moss Rock Cavern has two Necromancer adepts and it's a pretty small cave. But going through the same place over and over fries my brain much faster than going through a few different places does. It'll also help increase our blunt skill so we can get more strength as we level if I'm not constantly reloading to respawn the cave. After a couple of runs, we get a black soul gem from the Necromancer Adept in Blood Run Cave. We've also reached level 15 so we can do Mephal's quest. I'm looking forward to having the Ebony Blade, but I've always found this quest to be finicky. We have to acquire the Dalvilu Ceremonial Dagger and the Ulfgar family ring to plant on our targets to implicate the rival family. That's easy enough. Their houses are unlocked and empty for most of the day, so we can walk in and borrow them. Since we got the ring second, we're already in Hrol's house, so we wait until he comes home for the evening, and now what? We try hitting him with Volendrung, but since we get no sneak attack bonus with it, it's far from a one-shot and we immediately fail Mephal's quest because we were caught committing a crime. Even though no one else was in the house, so the only one who saw us was our target, who wouldn't have been in a position to tell anyone about it in a few more seconds. We reload and try using the Sanguine Rose, which has interesting results. Even though Hrol attacks us, we don't fail the quest. Once he's down, we wait for our Daedra to disperse, plant the ceremonial dagger, and head to Devon Dalvilu's house. Our first attempt on him doesn't end well either, despite using the Sanguine Rose, because it summoned a fire Atronach, and Devon is a Dunmer and thus very fire resistant. On our next try, we got a Daedroth, and that went much better. We plant the Ulfgar family ring on Devon, wait until morning, and tell one of the remaining family members that we saw Devon and Hrol fighting. And that works. Even though Hrol and Devon were left in different houses, and I'd assume Daedroth claws leave very distinct marks, they all immediately believe the shady drifter with very low personality. My only guess is that they were looking for an excuse to turn on each other, which I guess Mephala hinted at, so fair enough. We return to Mephala's shrine and receive the Ebony Blade, a katana that doesn't do quite as much damage as Volendrung, but swings faster, allows us to fully utilize Spellbreaker, and absorbs 8 health and silences its target if it's charged. However, it isn't much lighter, 46 weight compared to Volendrung's 60. So it still consumes a lot of stamina per swing. I assumed it would be lighter considering other katanas in Oblivion are around 20 weight, but it's about as heavy as a Daedric longsword. Stamina consumption will be an issue for all our weapons then, so we're just gonna have to deal with it. Also, I noticed another quirk of using the Sanguine Rose. Apparently it doesn't count as murder. Next up is Vermina's quest. Arkved's tower isn't far from Vermina's shrine, but its interior has a quirk that's rather crippling for us. We can't wait because we're considered to be trespassing. That means we can't heal between fights. In fact, the only way we can heal in here is with the Ebony Blade. It helps, but it runs out of charge well before we reach the end. We have no way of soul trapping enemies, so we can only recharge enchantments by using Varla stones, pre-filled soul gems, or paying NPCs. And those first two options require using consumables, so we're trying to avoid them. We can retreat and wait outside the tower, but after the first couple areas, that's a long way to backtrack. So we run past the Daedra and grab the Orb of Vermina. We're rewarded with the Skull of Corruption, which creates a clone of its target that attacks the original. We have to get to level 17 to do more Daedric quests, and we need a few more blunt skill increases, so we wander around and get the last few Daedric shrines and main quest locations marked on our map. We even visit Harcane Grove and hunt the unicorn that's part of Hircine's quest. The unicorn is in Harcane Grove at the start of the game, which isn't always the case. The Eye of Nocturnal doesn't appear in Tidewater Cave until we've started Nocturnal's quest. However, unlike Umbra, which can be given to Clavicus Vile at any level, we cannot give Hircine the Unicorn Horn until after we start his quest at level 17 or higher. This inconsistency makes me consider turning in Umbra early to be a bit glitchy. However, that's just my opinion, and when I say no glitches, I mostly mean we aren't going to jump on floating paintbrushes or clip into the end version of the Temple of the One to skip the main quest. Beyond that, I tend to avoid anything that's called a glitch or exploit on the wiki, but that still leaves a lot of gray areas like Umbra. We still need more blunt skill increases after we've found all the locations we'll need to visit, so we may as well start the main quest. As long as we pick up the last few Daedric Artifacts before the end, it'll be fine. At our level, the Kavach Gate has Daedroths, Dremora Kynereaves, Flame Atronachs, and Clanfears. The Clanfears were fast and did a lot of damage if they spammed their forward lunge. Daedroths could also be dangerous if we were cornered, and our lack of healing amplified any mistakes we made. The Ebony Blade's health absorption got us out of a few jams, and we got a few sneak attacks with it, but we mostly used Volendrung to preserve the Ebony Blade's charge. The Kavach guards were helpless, so the fight in front of the chapel was an absolute mess, but we made it to Martin and got him to Cloud Ruler Temple. Now we need the culty books, so we yell at Gwyneth and follow Boris into the sewers. We mostly faced rats and mud crabs, but there were a few goblin witches. Boris got distracted by their zombies, but Volendrung hit hard enough to take out the witches before they could heal. The sponsor and his backup were a bit tougher, but we got through them and took the last book. It would be great if we could use the Grand Ring of Aegis we found on them, but it isn't a Daedric artifact, so all we can do is sell it for gold to recharge our weapons. The raid on the Mythic Dawn Shrine was tougher than usual. The cultists got us to low health because the acolytes that ran kept us in combat so we couldn't heal. The cultists chipped us down with sheer numbers, and our pitiful defenses didn't help. The Sanguine Rose got us out of a few tight spots. Even the Scamp was a decent distraction. We also tried the Skull of Corruption, but another cultist in a sea of red robes wasn't easy to spot. We also tried the Wabbajack, but it didn't do anything. We returned the cultist book to Martin and took out the spies the Blades were too lazy to pursue, even though they saw them from their fortress walls. To progress the main quest further, we have to give Martin a Daedric artifact, and I want to test the Wabbajack more before we make that decision. If it isn't working, then it's an obvious choice to give to Martin, but if it is working, we may pick something else. After looking at the wiki and testing it a bit, I learned the Wabbajack only affects non-NPC creatures, but it is working. We've gotten enough skill increases to get 5 strength, so we level up to level 17. We trained Alteration to get 3 willpower, which increases our stamina. It only helps a bit because unlike Magicka, whose regeneration is partially based on its maximum, so having more Magicka from any source increases its regeneration, Stamina's regeneration is a flat rate, 10 per second if we aren't running, or 2 to 10 per second if we are running, depending on our athletic skill. That means our stamina will never regenerate fast enough for us to avoid getting tired while using heavier weapons. Oddly enough, a larger stamina pool can actually make a character weaker if they're using stamina fortifications. It's a longer tangent than I want to go off on since we can't use stamina fortifications in this run, but feel free to pause and read this if you're interested. It also works in Morrowind, and Just Background Noise used it in his All My Attributes Are Level 1 run, if you want a more in-depth explanation. If we had higher athletics, our stamina regeneration wouldn't slow down as much when we're running, but grinding athletics is mind-numbingly boring. The best way is to jam the analog stick into place so we're swimming against a wall while I work on the script or something for a long while. I'm not joking. I didn't think to train athletics until now, and we need to train alteration if we want to keep getting more willpower. We can only train 5 times per level, and the unused training sessions don't roll over, so the training sessions since we stopped training Armorer around level 10 were wasted. Which is entirely my fault, so here we are, swimming into a pillar holding up the bridge leading into the Imperial City. I wish one of the blade and blunt perks reduced their weapons' stamina consumption. I'd find that more useful than the backwards power attack I can never hit with. Now that we're level 17, we can complete Hircine's quest. By which I mean we can throw him a wolf pelt. We sold the bear pelt a while ago because the wolf pelt was easier to carry with us, and then immediately give him the unicorn horn. With that, we receive the Savior's Hide, one of our precious few armor pieces. It's a decent light cuirass, but more importantly, it gives us 25% magic resistance, doubling our magical defenses if our 40% spell reflection fails. If we'd played a Breton, this would have made us 75% magic resistant instead of 50%, but we couldn't effectively increase our strength until we got Volendrung at level 10, so we would have struggled to max out strength and endurance by level 20 as a Breton. It would have taken a lot of grinding armor with enemy gear or something. It still might have been worth it for the resistance, but it's not worth restarting over. Now for the other level 17 Daedric quest, Molag Balls. We head to the settlement that Molag Bal pointed us to after we gave him a lion pelt we found at the Mages Guild, and ask one of the residents about our target, Melis Petilius. Even with our low personality, we're able to convince them to talk without bribery. Our speechcraft isn't that good either. It started at 25 because we picked it as a major skill, but it's only gone up a couple times. We meet Melis at his wife's grave, where we drop the cursed mace provided by Molag Bal. Then we smack Melis with Volendrung. He chews us out telepathically for desecrating his wife's grave, and he attacks us. He took a lot of damage from that first hit, and I thought we'd have to remove the Ring of Namira so we didn't accidentally win the fight with damage reflection, but Melis got us below 20 health before it became a problem, and Molag Bal teleported us back to his shrine. I guess that was enough to corrupt Melis' soul, or at least enough to amuse Molag Bal, because we're rewarded with the Mace of Molag Bal. It does significantly more damage than Volendrung, even though it's a one-handed mace instead of a two-handed warhammer. It's also faster and lets us fully utilize Spellbreaker, so it's an upgrade in almost every way. Volendrung's paralysis is more useful than the Mace of Molag Bal's enchantment though. The Mace's enchantment doesn't even fully work. The strength absorption has no duration, and the magicka absorption is useless because we can't cast spells. However, we can use the mace as our main weapon and save the ebony blade and Volendrung for when we want to use their enchantments, which means we can recharge Volendrung without turning it into a money pit. The last Daedric quests require us to be at least level 20, so it's back to grinding. For lack of anything better to do, we grind the next 3 levels by closing random Oblivion gates. By the time we hit level 20, we've closed a total of 14 gates and found a ton of loot we can't use. I'm pretty sure there's enough to make us immune to magic and probably hit the armor cap if we were allowed to use it. And this is just the stuff I kept to show off. We should be able to spam our artifacts for the rest of the run without worrying about the cost, thanks to all the stuff we sold. We take our last point of strength as we ascend to level 20, and our speed is almost maxed at 95. Our willpower and agility are 57 and 56 respectively, so they aren't too bad. If we happen to pick up another level or two, we'll increase them, but we'd only get a little bit of stamina, speed, and 10 points of health per level, so we're not going to go out of our way to level further. We head into the Vallis Mountains to Boethia's shrine, only to realize we dropped all our Daedra hearts in the last Oblivion gate to carry more loot, so we have to buy a Daedra heart from the main ingredient despite the fact we've banished dozens of Dremora to the Shadow Realm. With that sorted, we head back to the shrine and offer the Daedra heart so we can enter Boethia's Tournament of the Ten Bloods. We have to take out one member of each other playable race. In our case, a Wood Elf, High Elf, Dark Elf, Breton, Imperial, Nord, Redguard, Khajiit, and Argonian. They all have solid stats and good gear, but there's nothing stopping us from using that against them by creating a clone of them to fight for us with the Staff of Corruption. At least, assuming the clone's brain doesn't break. If we clone an archer, the clone just stands there even if they're attacked, but it works well on the non-archer combatants. We also use the Sanguine Rose, and we're lucky enough to summon several Clanfears, Daedroths, and even a Frost Atronach, and only get stuck with a couple scamps over the course of 9 fights. Between the Corruption clones and the Rose's Daedra, we barely have to lift a finger. Volendrung's paralysis also proved useful, although I suspect we were lucky the paralysis wasn't reflected back at us, because the Stave's effects were reflected a few times. Boethia rewards us with Goldbrand, a katana with a strong fire enchantment. The Mace of Molag Bal does more physical damage, partly because our blunt skill is much higher than our blade skill, but Goldbrand does more total damage if it's charged. It's time to complete Clavicus Vile's quest. As I said earlier, we could have done it at any time, but I consider that kind of glitchy, and I also wanted to see the whole quest for this run. Turning in Umbra early skips a lot of the dialogue. We offer 500 gold to Clavicus, and we're off.
A hero I have had dealings with in the past. Bring the sword to me, and I'll reward you with my mask. You'll not find a better bargain, mortal. Begin your search in Hell's Gate.
We find Umbra's old master at Pell's Gate and convince him to tell us about Umbra, both the blade and, confusingly, the person.
You should be using around Pell's Gate either. Before I go on, let's clear something up. Are you here asking about the sword or the person? Which is it? Who is Umbra? I can tell you who Umbra used to be. Lenwyn. She's my apprentice, at least she was, until she found that sword. Never did say where it came from. She just showed up with it one day. Said it was called Umbra. But she was different. She'd always been fair with a sword, but she began looking for fights, became bloodthirsty, then started calling herself Umbra after the sword. Finally signed on with some mercenaries, but I heard that ended too. We haven't seen her in years. It's a powerful sword, no doubt about that. Jet black, got a wicked edge on it, and they say it can steal a man's soul. Can't say for sure. Some say they've seen her nearby, near the Vindasal ruins. Might just be wishful thinking, though. If she's around, she hasn't come into Pell's Gate. Nor should she. I fear that girl is long gone. If you seek her out, take care. She's a powerful one, or at least that sword is. I'd steer clear if I was you.
The ruin he points us to isn't far from Pell's Gate, and other than Umbra, there are only a few rats inside. Since we've started Clavicus Vile's quest, we can attack Umbra without getting a bounty, even if we sneak attack. I would have started the fight with Volendrung for its paralysis, but it doesn't get a sneak attack bonus. Goldbrand's fire damage wouldn't be multiplied by the sneak attack either, so we use the Mace of Moleg Bal for the first hit. After that, we tried cloning Umbra to turn her own attributes and gear against her, but the clone is unarmed. Apparently Umbra, meaning the blade, is excluded from the Staff of Corruption's copying. Sanguine's Rose works as normal, meaning it's as random as ever, but Umbra isn't easily distracted. She hits like a truck, so it isn't looking good. We probably should have used Volendrung to paralyze her, but instead we drew Goldbrand and attacked like mad. Even if she blocked, the fire damage got through. It worked. Barely. And we claimed Umbra from the remains of Umbra. Because that's not confusing at all. We return to the shrine, and now we have a choice. We can give Clavicus Umbra as agreed in return for the Mask of Clavicus Vile, or we can renege on the deal and keep Umbra. Umbra has a Soul Trap enchantment that, when combined with Azura's Star, would allow us to recharge our own gear. Gold isn't a concern at this point, but running out of charge in the middle of combat is, so that would be useful. Meanwhile, the mask is a heavy helm that'll give us a maximum of 7 armor. In reality, it'll give us less because our heavy armor skill isn't great, and its enchantment grants us 20 glorious personality. A Daedric artifact that's locked behind a level 20 quest is arguably worse than a Daedric helm that we could put a useful enchantment on. So surely we should keep Umbra. That was a trick question. We never had a choice. While I was looking over the wiki, I noticed this note at the end of the page for Clavicus Vile's quest. If you wish to achieve 100% completion, you must return the sword Umbra to Clavicus. This is the only way to obtain the Mask of Clavicus Vile, which is one of the 15 items that count towards the artifacts found statistic. This suggests Umbra is not a Daedric artifact, and lo and behold, Umbra cannot be given to Martin for the ritual. It's not unheard of for Daedric princes to have multiple artifacts. For example, Hircine has the Ring of Hircine and the Savior's Hide, and in Skyrim, the Dragonborn can acquire either artifact depending on how they resolve ill met by moonlight. But that's not the case here. Since we're not allowed to use Umbra, giving it up for the mask makes sense. It'll at least give us armor. We still need to complete Hermaeus Mora's quest, but we certainly aren't going to give Martin the Augma Infinium, so we may as well give him one of the artifacts we have and move the main quest forward. Wait, why is Martin talking about the armor of Tiber Septim? I thought Blood of the Daedra had to be completed before he would bring up that part of the ritual. Thankfully, we can still give him a Daedric artifact, and everything seems to progress properly, so I think it's fine. We give Martin Azura's star, since we won't ever have a way of soul-trapping enemies to fill it. It's surprising how often we've given it to Martin during these runs, considering that it's normally one of the most valuable artifacts in the game. Now we have to help Bird deal with an Oblivion gate outside Bruma. For what it's worth, Bird and the 2 guards with him have a lot of health at this level and can take a lot of punishment. But their damage isn't great, so it's up to us to deal with most of the enemies. Unfortunately, the Skull of Corruption only clones humanoid NPCs, so we could only use it on the Dremora, and I assumed that the Daedra summoned by the Sanguine Rose would freak out Bird and his guards, so I didn't even bother trying it. We bludgeoned our way through with our various melee weapons. We handled most of the enemies well, especially with Bird and the guards distracting some of them, but Storm Atronachs were still painful. They have ranged spells, and reflecting those spells doesn't damage them because they're immune to lightning. Real shocker, I know. They also reflect a portion of any melee damage they take, so even if we fought perfectly, we took a chunk of damage. That made fighting more than one Storm Atronach at a time difficult, and we had to break out the Ebony Blade a few times to heal. The Wraiths in Sancretor were more annoying than threatening, and I don't just mean they're wailing. They have spells that drain strength, and we're forced to drop things to avoid being over-encumbered in the middle of battle. We didn't drop anything important, just some armor we hadn't gotten around to selling, but it was still irritating. There were also enough wraiths to make finding a spot where we were allowed to wait without a ton of backtracking difficult, so we had to use the Ebony Blade to heal a few times. At least all our weapons can hit wraiths. Even if their enchantment is out of charge, it allows the weapon to hit wraiths and ghosts. Fighting the undead blades felt more like chopping down trees than combat, so nothing new there. We're closing in on the end of the main quest, so we'd better complete Hermaeus Mora's task.
My followers seek to perform a divination. For this, they need souls. One of each of the sentient races. You will provide these. I give you a spell to trap these souls. Return to me when you have finished. When you do, I will further your journey on your true path.
Competing in the arena is a great way to encounter enemies of each playable race, but we can't enter the arena without wearing an arena raiment. Both raiments are armored and they're enchanted, so they provide benefits in combat. That means we're stuck hunting down random enemies. Marauder archers are the only random enemies that have a chance of being Argonian outside of Veyond Cave, and melee marauders are the only ones that can be orcs. The Leowyn recommendation led us to a marauder hideout, plus Kalthar. By the time we finished that and cleared out Sersin, another marauder ruin, we'd gotten a soul from every race except Bosmer and Breton. We traveled to the ruin across from the tutorial sewer exit and found a Bosmer bandit archer, and we caught a Breton necromancer in Mossrock Cavern, completing our collection without attacking any non-hostile NPCs. Trapping souls for a Daedric prince is still evil in my opinion, so it's kind of funny we got no bounty from this. Even the Mages Guild, which is rabidly against necromancy during this time, has no issues with it, and I'd argue this is at least necromancy adjacent on account of the special black soul gem. Frankly, I'm uncomfortable with any soul trapping and find it to be a needlessly edgy part of the Elder Scrolls games, but that's neither here nor there. We return to the shrine and receive the Ogma Infinium, a book that can increase our stats in one of 3 ways. The Path of Steel raises our speed, strength, blade, blunt, and heavy armor by 10 points. The Path of Shadow raises our speed, agility, sneak, security, and light armor. The Path of Spirit is supposed to raise intelligence, willpower, conjuration, destruction, and restoration, but it's bugged and does not raise willpower. Because Bethesda. It's a shame because willpower and intelligence have their full effect when raised above 100, but strength and agility are less effective over 100. Strength will increase our stamina and carrying capacity, but not our melee damage. Agility will increase our stamina and may reduce the odds of being staggered. Stamina appears to play a larger role there, but it won't increase bow damage. Most skills also have no effect above 100, but raising major skills above 100 with the Ogma Infinium can allow a character to get up to 3 more levels if they've already mastered all their major skills and don't want to exploit jail time to lower them. We take the Path of Steel because I'd rather have carrying capacity than stagger reduction, and it also gives us a 10-point buffer before our melee damage starts dropping if our strength is damaged or drained, and all the skills are useful. Some of the blunt skill was wasted because we had over 90, but it was probably the difference between us mastering it or ending somewhere in the upper 90s during the run. Now that we've gotten all the Daedric artifacts from the base game, at least the ones that can be used for the Blood of the Daedric quest, we head to Miskarkand and get the Great Welkin Stone. We've been grinding Sneak quite a bit to level, so we're an expert in it. Even without the Ring of Khajiit's Chameleon, we can get multiple sneak attacks on enemies if we attack them from behind in a dark area and stay still after the first hit. Nothing really pushes us to be more creative than that, so we just bludgeon everything with the Mace of Molech Ball, including the King of Miskarkand. I'm pretty sure his spells hurt his own zombies more than they hurt us. We got some allies for Bruma because we closed the Oblivion gates outside of Coral, Anvil, and Shadenhall when we were grinding to get to level 20. Not that they're that much better than the Bruma militia, but every little bit helps, especially since Boris and Joffrey aren't keen on joining the battle. I know I've only kept you guys alive once, but that doesn't mean you can sit back and watch. This random Khajiit lady is more eager to help than you. We can't use the Sanguine Rose. The guards tend to freak out about normal summons here, never mind the ones that are unpredictable like the roses. The Skull of Corruption could be used on the Dremora, but it doesn't work on the other Daedra, and I wasn't sure how the guards would react to the corrupted clones either, so I didn't risk using it. The Wabbajack was likewise avoided. It's a shame because I could see this battle being really fun with all those things causing chaos, but they would probably get all the guards and Martin infighting and removed from the census, because we can't just tell everyone to stay back and let our monsters handle it. We have to break out the Ebony Blade to keep ourselves going, and by the time we enter the Great Gate, we're dangerously low on health, and the Ebony Blade is almost out of charge. But we absorb just enough health from a Spider Daedra to survive jumping over the lava. Our high acrobatics skill and magic resistance also helped, and some jumping, zigzagging, and light screaming got us past the siege engine and firebolt turrets and into the Sigil Stone Tower. We sprinted through the tower, stopping only for these painfully slow doors and these guillotines. We had to be very careful when jumping over these. They could damage us if we landed on them, but jumping over them was still the safest option because they could also damage us if we ran under them too early while they were raising back up. And there were enemies chasing us, so we didn't have the luxury of waiting around. After we were past those, it was mostly smooth sailing to the Great Sigil Stone because we could outrun all the enemies. We arrived back in Tamriel with 30 health to spare, which is only enough to survive 1 or maybe 2 hits at this level. Almost all the guards and militia survived. I think even the Khajiit lady lived because I didn't find her, but somehow Joffrey and Boris didn't make it. We mostly run into Frost Atronachs, Daedros, Zivalize, and Dramora in Paradise. Goldbrand is exceptional against the Frost Atronachs thanks to its fire damage, but against other enemies, the Mesa Moleg Ball is still our best option unless we need the Ebony Blade for healing. The fight against Mankar Cameron was disappointing. I expected to have trouble getting the Staff of Corruption, Wabbajack, and Sanguine Rose to work properly thanks to Mankar's spell reflection and spell absorption. In fact, finding any targets for the Wabbajack was difficult. Ruma, Raven, and Mankar are all NPCs, so it won't work on them, only on creatures they summon. As for the Skull of Corruption, I couldn't get it to work on Mankar at all. He reflected or absorbed it a few times, but even when it appeared to get through those, it didn't generate a clone. It might have been bad luck, or maybe I missed the clone in the chaos, but we fiddled around with the skull for so long, Mankar won on our first attempt. The Sanguine Rose worked, but still struggled to get past Mankar's spell reflection and absorption. And Goldbrand and Volendrung's enchantments had similar issues, so we just bludgeoned Mankar with the Mesa Moleg Ball. I was hoping for a crazy fight with corrupted clones, Wabbajacked enemies, and a Sanguine Rose summon all running around. Maybe we could have created clones of Ruma and Raven, but corrupted clones focus on attacking the original version of themselves, so I don't think we could have gotten Ruma and Raven's clones to help us against Mankar much. We have the Amulet of Kings, so all we have to do is get to the Temple of the One. The Daedra invading the palace are tough, but there are tons of guards on our side. Outside the palace, it's another story. There are way more enemies than the guards can keep up with, but we run past them to the Temple of the One, where Martin turns into a kaiju and banishes Dagon, proving that yes, you can beat Oblivion with only Daedric Artifacts. This run was tricky. We died or were brought to low health often due to our lack of in-combat healing and mediocre defenses. Playing a Breton would have given us an additional 25% magic resistance compared to playing an Orc, but we would have had less health, especially at the start because of their low endurance. We never had good physical defenses. With the Mask, Savior's Hide, and Spellbreaker, we had 22 armor. So we were taking 78% of all incoming physical damage, and that's assuming our equipment was in perfect condition. The Ring of Namira also reflected 12% of incoming physical damage, but even with the two combined, we were taking most incoming physical damage. I think playing any race other than Orc or Breton in this challenge would be harder, because they would only have the 25% magic resistance from the Savior's Hide and the 40% spell reflection from the Ring of Namira and Spellbreaker. Some of them also have low endurance, and an Altmer would have elemental weaknesses to contend with. I was hoping the weirder artifacts like Wabbajack and the Skull of Corruption would be more useful, but most major fights didn't have eligible targets, had enemies with spell reflection and spell absorption, or we had allies that would flip their lid if we used them. I'm considering doing a staves only run, so maybe that'll give them another chance. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that run. If you did, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel. And feel free to post challenge run ideas for Oblivion or other games in the comments. Channel memberships are also a thing if you want to support the channel further, but most of all, thank you for watching to the very end of the video. I'll see you next time.